Welcome to the program. I'm Mark Imperial. This segment's being brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where busy entrepreneurs, professionals, and business owners publish to grow their businesses and to leave a legacy. Joining me on the program on this segment is Craig Slavin. Craig, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate the invite.
Craig, tell us a little bit about your company. Give me your company name and the types of folks that you help.
Well, we actually have a couple of different companies in one of two spaces. For many years, I've specialized in franchising, and that company is Franchise Central. I also deal with independent businesses because we're talking about aspiring entrepreneurs, but not everybody's entrepreneurial, and not everybody should own an independent business. And I can share with you the research that we've done with an assessment tool that we've created called the Navigator. We have one for Franchise Navigator and the other for Entrepreneurship Navigator. And what it basically does is it takes an individual and measures them against highly successful people in that particular space. And I honestly believe, having worked with thousands of people all over the world and hundreds of companies, including Disney and Apple and AT&T, that, people really don't understand business. They look at it from a passion standpoint. Oh, I like that. I like the frozen yogurt, or I like golf, and maybe I should own a golf franchise. And in reality, what they've got to look at is internally, what is it that they're best suited to operate? I can tell you plenty of stories where the golf enthusiast buys a golf franchise and it's a retail franchise, and he's miserable because he'd rather be out on the golf course. So we tend to get people away from the passion and combine passion and intellect so that both come together and they can buy the right or get into the right kind of business. And the other thing that people tend to look at is financial. What can I afford? And I can tell you from experience that just because somebody can afford the airplane doesn't necessarily mean they're qualified to be the pilot. And so putting money aside, yeah, it's important. You've got to have the resources. But I can tell you that if somebody's really qualified to operate a particular kind of business, money's available. The financing is available. So that's not your primary focus, is the money. So what we've done is we've actually quantified the definition of what an entrepreneur is. And those people that are involved in a franchise, and in your area, I was president and CEO of Giordano's. So I spent a lot of time in your neck of the woods in Oak Brook at that location. People that operate a franchise are entrepreneurial, but not entrepreneurs. They've got some of the entrepreneurial qualities. People that own and operate an independent business, not affiliated with the franchise, are highly entrepreneurial people, and they do not do well in a franchise business because they want to make up the rules. They don't want to follow the rules. So, that's the general rule of thumb is, what kind of business am I really best suited to operate? So you've got to look inside first, as opposed to looking out at businesses that are available.
I appreciate your pragmatic stance on that because I agree with you wholeheartedly on people are, entrepreneurial. They think we had a term for it. We call them wantrepreneurs. They want it. They love the idea of entrepreneurship, but they don't really know what they're getting themselves into. So they can't say they want it until they have a taste of it, so to speak. So this is making more sense to me now because coming from the franchise space, did you sort of develop this tool to first take the temperature of the person that was kind of coming at you saying, I'm thinking about doing a franchise?
Well, what happened was I started getting phone calls from my clients, and they were asking me, I remember the one from Mrs. Fields Cookies. He called and he said, listen, I'm interested in awarding a franchise to this particular person. How do we know if they're a good fit? And my response was, you don't, and you won't for generally 2 years after the fact. After you've signed that agreement with that particular person, because it takes 6 to 8 months to ramp up the business, 6 to 8 months to figure out what you're doing, and 6 to 8 months for it to level off, and you're not really going to know. So I was sort of egged on to be predictive, to come up with some kind of model to be predictive. So back in Chicago, I spent 37 winters in Chicago, raised my family there. I assembled a mastermind of industrial, clinical, organizational, and behavioral psychologists, people that knew about assessments and knew about behavior. I knew business, I knew franchising. And we looked at every single one of the tests that are out there, personality profiles and this and that. And the good news is some of them have been out there for a long time. The bad news is they've been out there for a long time and they're not really measuring things that are relevant today. And what we found was that there's very little, if any, correlation between personality and performance. It's all about, does somebody have the right stuff? And what does that mean? It means, what is their value system? And is their value system in sync with the value system of either that business or that particular franchise? So we created the Navigator, which is a behavioral assessment tool. It's values based and it identifies skills. It takes less than 10 minutes to take. And what we do with a particular company or a space, could be a job, it could be a franchise like Supercuts, and we benchmark the existing operators. We look at using the KPIs of a company, the key performance indicators. How do they measure success? How can we quantify that? And based on that, and based on the scores of the Navigator, which is a quadrant-based system, scores come out between 0 and 100%, we create a statistically valid profile of which candidates are then measured against or compared to. And that way they can determine very quickly, 8 to 10 minutes, is this somebody that is a good fit for the business model? And then what happened was about 10, 11 years ago, we re-engineered the assessment and created a consumer tool called Connect Me to the right franchise. Because everybody wants to know what's the right franchise for me. And there's tons of franchise brokers and business brokers that'll tell you, I'll find the right franchise for you. But it's subjective. It's not objective or scientific. It's, I think you should be looking at this particular franchise. We wanted something that was scientific. So if you can imagine, over all these years, 25 some odd years, we've created the profiles for all these franchise companies. We know the liquid capital requirements, and we know the geographic areas where they want to grow. So an individual takes the Connect Me assessment, it takes their Navigator scores, their liquid capital, and their geographic preference, goes into the database, and makes a pure scientific match. It's very cool. And we've put a lot of people into business scientifically by what's best for them.
That sounds fascinating. So it sounds like you're serving both sides, the franchisor side and then the potential franchisee, trying to match them up if they're not sure what type of business is maybe best for them. Is that right?
That's correct. That's correct. We even take it a couple steps further with the franchisors or even the franchisees. And the assessment is used for team building purposes. Everybody talks about culture, but nobody tells you what culture is. Culture is shared values. And by using the assessment, which measures and quantifies values, we can identify very quickly if there's shared values and what that culture is of that particular company. So we use it for team building. A lot of companies have us, measure and evaluate potential C-level candidates.
This is terrific. Now, tell me a little bit about how this got started. Give me your evolution. Like, what inspired you to get into franchising? You spent many years in the franchise. It sounds like on both sides. It sounds like you were working like at Giordano's inside the franchise, and then in the industry, matching people. Like, give us, like, what inspired you? Give us your story.
Listen, I never thought I'd be in franchising. It was an accident. And I grew up wanting to be an architect. I wanted to be the next Buckminster Fuller, Paulo Soleri. That's what I wanted to do. So I studied architecture at the University of Arizona. Something occurred in our family that pushed me into wanting to explore who I was. I ended up going to work with a company that was highly entrepreneurial, that wanted to grow. It was a sales and marketing company. And with my architectural background, where I'm bottom up and the entrepreneur's top down, he asked me, he said, well, let's move the offices from Tucson, which is where I'm from, to Phoenix, and then we'll grow it from there. And I told him, you're nuts. You're never going to be able to do it. You don't have the emotional temperament to do it. So he told me, do it. So I did. I went in, I created systems and formats and procedures for the particular business. I call it define, refine, discipline, document, and computerize if possible. And within the next 18 months, we opened up 36 offices around the country. This was in the early 70s. Many of those offices are still in business today. And then I got recruited by a company. Depending upon your age, you may or may not recognize it, but it was called Evelyn Wood Reading Dynamics.
Yeah,
It was a
absolutely. They used to run the infomercials on the television all the time, all through the 70s, 80s.
And I ran the growth program for them and opened up offices all over the country. They ended up selling it to Britannica. So it's now part of the Britannica Learning Centers. And I traveled around the country opening up offices for them. And then I got recruited by the second oldest and fourth largest pizza company in the country out of Birmingham, Alabama. And I went to work for them growing that company. And then in the late 70s, I met a fellow from the south suburbs of Chicago, and he said, you got a great background. Let's, come on up to Chicago and work with us in building our business. And I did. I spent a couple of years, and it really didn't work out well. But I was being interviewed by the then business editor of the Dallas Morning News, who asked me the same question, what's your background? And I told him. He said, well, you know what? If you ever decide you want to own your own business, I've got the best name. I said, what's that? He said, Franchise Architects. I thought, well, that's a slam dunk. So I incorporated in December of 79, took on our first client in 1980, and it's been franchising ever since. And because of my background in architecture and systems and, creating replicable and duplicatable business models, I've been very fortunate. I was retained by Disney to help conceptualize the Disney stores. Ron Roner, director of marketing from Apple, hired me to help conceptualize the Apple stores. I got hired by AT&T to help in the divestiture of a very little known technology called cellular. So we worked early on in cellular, and I've created restaurants in the Middle East and health clubs for Bally Total Fitness and business units for Hewlett Packard. And so there it goes. That's what it's all about. And I'm still working because I love what I'm doing. I love the whole process of taking somebody and helping guide them into the right thing.
That sounds like a really exciting way to make a living, just helping people in their entrepreneurial journey. You've got a different story, different adventure every day. It sounds fantastic. And with that wealth of knowledge and experience that you have, I see the big picture here. You're helping in so many different facets. When you say franchising, you could help companies with their franchise systems. When it comes to people that are looking for a franchise, you can help them. I mean, there's too many things that you could do potentially. Before we came on, Craig, you mentioned that the world's changed today. And you're saying, I want to hear, your thoughts on what's changed and what's made what obsolete, and why are we reinventing ourselves today?
Well, I think a number of things have happened, certainly accelerated by the pandemic. And that is, it's made competition much stronger. Those that are strong business models are surviving. Essential businesses are doing very well right now. Non-essential businesses have a longer recovery time. We work with Regis Corporation, which is Supercuts, and I don't know how many other brands. Window Genie, which is a service business for homeowners, doing exceptionally well. The other thing that has happened, and it's really played in my direction, is people aren't traveling anymore. I'm a million miler on American. I'm a million miler on United. I've been all over the world. and I don't travel anymore. So if I have a phone and internet connection, I'm good to go. I can do anything I want to with anybody anywhere on the planet. So this stay at home really played to my strengths because I've been staying at home for many, many years. And I did sell franchise architects to Arthur Andersen in the late 80s, bought it back in the early 90s. And that was one of the few times I ever had to report to work and found out that that was not really a good fit for me. So, yeah, things have changed. The way in which we maneuver, or as I like to say, navigate the business environment, it's very different. The the room for mistakes is not as great as it used to be. And I've often said, and I've been quoted as saying that businesses and entrepreneurs do not survive because they do so many things right. They survive because they don't do enough things wrong. And in this particular environment, the more things they do wrong, the less chance of survival they've got.
Fascinating insights. Craig, for my audience out there listening right now, I want you to speak to them and call out the folks that you could help the most. Because I've noticed, like, even at the beginning of the pandemic, I was quite surprised to see as many of the businesses and restaurants that were closing and struggling and shutting down. I'd immediately see the spaces being snapped up by new companies. Must be an opportunity in the air for an uprising of new businesses to take over those places. Tell us a little bit about what that's like. Speak to my audience, call out the folks, the types of folks that you'd like to help, and tell them how to get a hold of you.
Well, just because those retail spaces are vacant doesn't really mean that another retail business should go in there. That depends on the pandemic and how well people live by the rules of social distancing, wearing masks, and things like that. But what is happening with a lot of those businesses where they maybe were once restaurants, they're now changing to different kinds of business formats that are more essential. So essential businesses, as I said earlier, are doing quite well. We work with Tide Cleaners. That's an essential business. And that can come in and take over a restaurant space because a lot of these restaurants cannot survive by takeout and delivery, where they've got these huge facilities. So the people I like to help the most, and we've done this with a lot of people, are those that realize that their job may never return. And even if it does return, they're going to be either underemployed or it's not going to be the same as it used to be. So those that want to make the transition into being self-employed. Now, if you think about self-employment, you've got two choices. One is an independent business where you're doing it all on your own. The second is a franchise where you step into a business model that's already been tested, and it may have market share. And, the reason why somebody would look at a franchise versus an independent business depends on their appetite to create. If they want to create everything from scratch, they should not be in a franchise. And what I've done to help people understand this is dissected business into 8 cylinders: operations, everything that happens within the 4 walls; marketing and advertising, who we promote to and how we promote to them. So it's operations, marketing, advertising; legal, sales, it's all about sales; financial, it's all about return on investment. Otherwise, it's not a good venture for anybody. So it's operations, marketing, advertising; legal, sales, financial; organizational, human resources, how you build and manage the company; IT, imaging, branding, and identity. So those people that want to be self-employed but independent, they got to figure out each of those cylinders. For people that want to be self-employed and don't want to figure out all of those cylinders, they should look at a franchise.
That is absolutely fantastic insights, and I appreciate that. Craig, how do they find you online? Do you have a website or a URL you can give out?
Yeah, we have a couple. If you're interested in possibly looking at a franchise and you want access to Connect Me, you can go to franchisenavigator.com and you'll see one of the tabs is for Connect Me, and it explains. And there's a button there where you can purchase it. We only charge $49.95 for the assessment, and that's to go over the results. Anything past that, we're actually paid by the franchise, or if a match is made and everybody's happy. If you're an independent business person and you're looking at how can I grow my business more effectively, how can I turn mid performers into high performers, then we would invite you to visit navigatorhub.org. And there you can even test drive a couple of the assessments. The entrepreneurship assessment and is one of the options. And see for yourself, do you have the right stuff? Because that's the starting point. So think of the Navigator assessments as like a GPS system. If you want to reach your destination, you have to have a starting point. So the Navigator assessment and what it reveals is your starting point.
Greg, this has been absolutely terrific. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to share with my audience today. And I wish you continued success for you and for all of your clients.
Mark, thank you very much. And thank you for the invite.
Craig Slavin. This segment's been brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where business owners, entrepreneurs, and busy professionals publish to grow their businesses and to leave a legacy. That's all for now. I'm Mark Imperial. Until next time, thanks for tuning in.